Hi, I'm Sean Reimer. I don't rhyme. And with COVID-19 being my life for the foreseeable future, I need something that'll keep my mind occupied. And that something is Star Trek. I first got into Star Trek in 2009 when the first Bad Robot movie hit theaters. I remember the first time I saw the Enterprise. It was love at first sight. If you thought my reaction to seeing the Millennium Falcon at Galaxy's Edge was an overreaction, imagine my face if they made a real-life Enterprise. Which they were supposed to be in Vegas at some point, but that's a story for another YouTuber to tell you. Naturally, as the movies were my portal into this universe, and considering how there's not going to be any more movies, I figured I should rank them, from most unwatchable to the most likely to beat a Star Wars movie at the box office. Probably Solo, let's be realistic. Number 13, Insurrection. Note that this was originally a three-way tie between Insurrection, the motion picture, and The Final Frontier. But I did have to choose, and Insurrection is at the bottom, mostly for the fact that none of it I found enjoyable. The motion picture at least had some striking imagery and the music was fantastic. And The Final Frontier has a good message, and a lot of it can be enjoyably bad. I gained no pleasure from watching Insurrection. The CGI looks like something straight out of Birdemic. The crew going through puberty is uncomfortable, to say the least. And on top of all of that, the message is not logical, and both sides involved are incredibly stupid. At the same time this movie takes place, the Dominion War was going on, threatening billions of lives that could be saved by this miracle planet that defies aging. So, what does the Federation decide to do? Not diplomatically negotiating with the Baku, or, I don't know, using another part of the planet other than this stupid village, because it's a giant planet. But no, they're going to stick an undercover android to spy on the Baku, while the Federation teams up with another race who want to wipe the Baku off the planet. Who the fuck hired this admiral? Maybe it would have helped if it were written by a Deep Space Nine writer who actually knew about the galaxy at this point. Oh, wait, it was. And to think all this happened because Picard had a boner. This is the second most humiliating story involving Picard's character. Bite Me movie. Number 12, the slow motion picture. Gene, we get it. The Enterprise is beautiful and you think Starfleet should wear pajamas. But you're not 2001 and human males have genitals. V'ger is an interesting idea for a single episode of the TV series. But you can tell it doesn't have the time to span a feature-length movie. I guess this movie technically delivered what was expected of it. It was Star Trek the Motion Picture. A movie version of Star Trek. The TV show. Too bad people expected it to boldly go where no episode of the TV show had gone before. Number 11, The Final Frontier. Captain Kirk is climbing a mountain. Why is he climbing a mountain?
He wants to make love to the mountain.
Yes, Kirk, we need our pain. But this movie is painful in all the wrong places and kind of boring in all the wrong places. Shatner's directing isn't too bad, but his writing is like his acting. Batshit crazy. It reminds me of The Room more than Star Trek. There's not much more to say other than, what does God need with a starship? Number 10, Generations. The less said about Kirk's stupid death, the better. This movie is stupid. The motion ship, stupid. The Nexus, stupid. The destruction of the Enterprise D, one of the most legendary ships to bear the name. Stupid. The uniforms constantly changing. Stupid. The passing of the torch from TOS to TNG deserved so much better. We wanted to see Kirk on the bridge of the Enterprise D. Not under a bridge, pulling a George Takei impression.
Oh my.
Number 9. Nemesis. Look, everyone blames this movie for killing the franchise. Everyone blames this movie for disrupting the odd number, even number pattern. But I disagree. In my opinion, Nemesis is the worst best Star Trek movie. It has some pointless action scenes and B4 is utterly wasted, but Data's sacrifice carried a surprising amount of weight. For a couple decades at least. The concept of Picard having a clone raised far differently than he was a really cool idea. And finally, we can see what the Enterprise E is capable of in combat. We got a taste of it in First Contact, but everything is on display here, including Troy's telekinesis and the ship's bottomless pit. Seriously, how many decks does this ship have? It's the first and honestly only Star Trek fight that uses CGI to its full potential, with the ships ducking and weaving everywhere. Not like this. It's sloppy, but I don't think it's awful to watch. Plus, can we admire Sir Patrick Stewart taking a pay cut to help production? Number 8, Into Darkness. I hated this movie when it came out. Teenage Me even wrote a review to Jonathan Paula's movie reviews. But looking back, I think it's an improved version of Space Seed. Although, considering all the corrupt admirals in Starfleet, no wonder Kirk warned Picard against the promotion. And then Picard accepted it anyway. Okay, whatever. Like I said, an improved version of Space Seed. This movie sets up a much better rivalry between Kirk and Khan than the original episode did. And with Khan being a twisted Starfleet manipulated mirror image of Kirk. But the problem is that the movie doesn't want to be Space Seed. It wants to be Wrath of Khan, and it fails. It's not that the performances aren't good. Kirk and Khan actually share the same space together. Although, for some reason, multiple actors in this movie do this thing where they stare at the camera as long as possible without blinking, and then when they do, all the tears come out for their crying scenes. Like, come on, it's Benedict Cumberbatch. I'm sure he knows how to cry naturally. But the Shakespeare and the tragedy and the foreshadowing and the friendship and hell, the quotable lines woven throughout Wrath of Khan, they're nowhere to be found. Kirk changed throughout Wrath of Khan. He finally faced death. Kelvin Kirk doesn't. Plus, the film doesn't know if it wants Khan to be the bad guy or not. Sometimes it's him, sometimes it's Admiral Marcus. And both are forgettable performances. They wanted something more grounded, but in return, they got a dull, uninteresting film. Number 7, The Search for Spock. Like how Nemesis was the worst, best Star Trek movie, I think Search for Spock is the best, worst Star Trek movie. The plot is, well, to quote the Vulcan at the end, illogical. Spock's death changed Kirk deeply. And I think this movie undoes a lot of that change. But my favorite part of this movie is when Kirk loses everything. The death of the Enterprise is still hard for me to watch. It's the most emotional moment for me in all of Star Trek. And the reason it has so much weight is because it was all a result of Kirk's past recklessness coming back to bite him. It's a messy movie, but it has one of the best moments in sci-fi. Number 6, Star Trek 2009, my introduction into Star Trek, and the only franchise to pull off a reboot while respecting the original. JJ made something that felt new but familiar at the same time. Some of the cast were brilliant recapturings of the original actors, while Pine and Quinto bring new depth to Kirk and Spock respectively. Spock in particular comes off a bit too angry and Kirk a bit too reckless, but given that it's a new timeline and it's early on into it, I'll let it slide. And it looks fucking gorgeous. Say what you will about the Kelvin timeline, but this brought Star Trek to a new level and a new audience. Number 5, The Undiscovered Country. It's a murder mystery in space with Shakespeare-quoting Klingons. What's not to love? Actually, the whole shape-shifting prison plot dragged on a bit. I wanted to see more of the murder mystery on the Enterprise, but the final battle made it worth it. It was a fitting send-off for the original series cast, with them literally flying into the sunset. Or sunrise. Depends on what time it was on the Enterprise. Number 4, The Voyage Home. This used to be my favorite. I love the comedy and the lack of a real central villain. Well, except for this weird metallic cylinder that was never brought up before and was never brought up again. I've since grown a little cynical about it, mainly how it focuses on whales like a lot of other 80s movies, and how Kirk's demotion is pretty much a slap on the wrist. And how they talk about swearing not existing, even though it does later. Anyway, even I'll admit it's pretty charming. It's probably the Star Trek movie with the most character, and we owe a lot to The Voyage Home. Its success at the box office led to the next generation being greenlit, and the Enterprise becoming a family tree. What else to say, but it's quite the whale of a tale. Number 3, First Contact. Picard versus Borg. Enough said. Okay, maybe not. If you want an amazing Picard story, this is among the top. The Borg are legitimately terrifying, and it's intriguing to see Picard's drive to sacrifice everything to beat them, including his crew and ultimately almost his ship. Speaking of the ship, it's the Enterprise E! And she kicks Borg ass. Maybe a little too easily at the beginning, but still. And hey, we get to see the Defiant, even though it gets pounded like Riley Reid in a Borg cocky. This movie is where Patrick Stewart and Brent Spiner get to shine. Jonathan Frakes' directing is the cherry on the sundae. Safe to say, resisting your enjoyment would be futile. Now, I go back and forth between these two all the time. And Trekkies are going to be pissed at what's at number 2. Number 2, The Wrath of Khan. It's a classic. The music by James Horner. The standout acting from Shatner and Montalban, who don't even physically share a scene together. The horror yet beauty of death, and Kirk strive to avoid it. The quotable lines, you name it, this movie has it. It's as close to a perfect Star Trek movie that there's ever been. So why isn't it number 1? Number 1, Beyond. Star Trek Beyond is not the best Star Trek movie. It's definitely not the best Star Trek trailer, but it's my Star Trek movie. I can call it my own. I can say I grew up with these characters like Pines Kirk, who I can finally see as a captain now. I grew up with this Enterprise, which made it even more heartbreaking to see it destroyed. Not even fast, but piece by piece slowly. Kirk's face when he sees the ship crash says 1,000 words. It combined old Trek with new and elevated both. The directing by Justin Lin is something to behold. Everything is so big in scale. It continues to play with new Trek themes, criticizing the Federation while still showing what it can be at its core. And it's a fitting send-off for Anton and Leonard, both gone too soon. I am so sad to see this movie bombing, and the rest of this timeline shelved, probably scrapped. But if this is the end of Star Trek, at least for the silver screen, I can confidently say that Beyond fits its title. I'm Sean Reimer. I don't rhyme. Let me know in the comments what you guys thought.